Where else would you rather be? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association. Welcome to the people of Penn State. Each week on the podcast, you can expect to hear the voices of Penn Staters talking about what they're passionate about, and you can expect to feel the pride and the power of the Penn State Network. Today, our guest on the people of Penn State is Anessa Fike, otherwise known as the Queen of Fractional HR. She is the CEO and founder of Fike & Co., a multi-million-dollar consulting firm that specializes in interim or fractional people, HR, and talent executive leadership with companies that are experiencing growth, scale, transition, or transformation. Anessa has led more than a dozen startups and organizations as the chief people officer and has worked with more than 110 organizations globally, including NPR, Niche, and Uber. Anessa has become an industry leader on all things people and talent. She is a Penn State journalism graduate. Please welcome to the podcast, Anessa Fike.
Hi, thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for having me, Paul.
Now, Anessa, where are you today? Where are you joining us from?
I am joining you from gray skies, Raleigh, North Carolina, which is typically not that gray and not this cold here, but it's still a chilly one for us.
Great place to live. We lived in Greenville, North Carolina for 10 years, but we would come up and we would visit the Beef Barn every once in a while there in Raleigh.
Yeah, it's a good one. And I used to, we'll probably get into this a little bit, but journalism background, I actually worked for a newspaper in Eastern North Carolina. So I'm familiar with that side of the state as well. Yeah.
Excellent. So let's talk. How did you become a Penn State Nittany Lion?
Oh, wow. So this has taken me back. Penn State was always in my family. My dad went to Penn State. He actually ran one of the mining programs at the New Kensington campus when he was very young, in his early 20s. And then he, when I was looking at schools, looking at colleges, we were a Penn State family. I knew I always wanted to go to Penn State. So I applied, I got in, and I was done. So it was a very easy thing for me to say, I'm going to go to Penn State and I'm going to do that. There really weren't any other colleges in mind for me.
So you come to Penn State. What were you involved in as a student here?
Oh, gosh. So it's funny that you asked me that, too. In high school, I did all the things. So I did drill team. I was captain of the soccer team. I was head of the newspaper. I was president of National Honor Society. And I decided that in college, I wanted to take a little bit of a breather. However, I got a little restless with the breather. And I was involved with Thon. I was involved with some of the homecoming festivities. I was also involved with Calliope, which is a literary magazine that was there then at Penn State. And then I would volunteer some hours here and there across campus. But realistically, I focused in on making sure that I was going to get my degree and get my degree quickly. So I actually completed my degree with 2 minors in 4 years. And so wanted to kind of enjoy Penn State, but make sure I was, really focusing on getting the degree and then moving on into the real world. Yeah.
So we talked about you being a journalism grad. When you came to Penn State, and you just alluded to it earlier by talking about being a reporter with a newspaper, what was the initial career goal? Was it to go into journalism? Was it to be a reporter and work in the news media?
No, not at all, actually. I first got accepted into the college for biology. So it was biology first. I thought, I want to be a doctor. Well, when you're a senior in high school, you're not always thinking about the most logical things. And I realized very early on that I don't like seeing other people's blood, so I probably shouldn't be a doctor. So then I switched from biology to engineering. My dad is a civil engineer. He's also a mining engineer. And I thought, okay, I'm going to, continue the family business of being an engineer. And so I got into engineering. I started into engineering, took a few classes, and realized my mind is not mechanically gifted. It does not really do well in the engineering sense. So then I actually switched to advertising, and then I switched to journalism. And the reason that I ended up on journalism was because I was having a discussion with my mom while there at Penn State. And I said, well, I know Dad wants me to be an engineer. And she said, your dad doesn't care if you're an engineer or not. You do what you want to do. And I said, she's like, what do you love to do? I said, I love to write. And she said, why don't you be a journalist? And I thought, like, light bulb moment. Yeah, that sounds great. I'm going to do that. And actually, that's what made me switch from engineering to advertising to journalism.
What a long, strange trip it was.
Right.
This is the People of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined by Anessa Fike. She is the CEO and founder of Fike & Co., and she's also the author of The Revolution of Work. So, Anessa, you go from getting your journalism degree, right? And you just took us through that path to get that journalism degree here at Penn State. Take us the rest of the way to how you became an HR guru.
Yeah. So I was in, journalism for a few years. I worked for a family-owned. It's since been, sort of acquired and reorged a little bit, but then family-owned newspaper in Eastern North Carolina. And I was there for almost 2 years, won a press award. We had an amazing experience where we had a story that broke that really allowed us to showcase what we could do as a small but bonded paper. And it was during the time of journalism where everything was going online. And a lot of the newspapers didn't really understand what we should put online. What do we give people? What should be, kind of behind a paid wall? What should be free? What do we even put, right? So a lot of that it was changing very quickly in the journalism space. And at that time, I had a friend. I had actually interviewed her for a story, and she owned and worked at a bridal gallery in Eastern North Carolina. And she said, if you ever get tired of working at the newspaper, you come and see me. And so, like I said, journalism was going through a weird, awkward time. And I thought, let me just take a breather from this for a second. I'm not so sure where the industry is going to go. And I want to just take a beat. So that's what I did. I went and actually managed a bridal salon for about a year. And then I went to work with a friend of mine that told me about this amazing place called the Motley Fool. And the Motley Fool was outside of Washington, D.C. It's, was started by two brothers back in the AOL days when you logged on to AOL Messenger around individual investing and creating newsletters for individual investors. And I thought, let me check out this place. So I started actually working at the Motley Fool as an executive assistant to the chief people officer, the president, and the chief technology officer. And I managed their calendars, their teams. I worked with them on a day-to-day basis. And about 6 months later, I was offered two jobs. I was offered a job on the HR side with the CPO, and I was offered a job on the president's team that was more business-minded towards operations. And I had the choice to decide between which way I wanted to go. And I decided HR. And it's looking back, it's interesting how similar the skills and the traits that you use in journalism are also the skills and the traits that you use in HR. You are talking to people, you're trying to get their story, you're trying to find if they're, their authentic story, reading their body language, understanding them, right? All of that is kind of very similar between HR and journalism. And so I started to do work in the HR field with the Motley Fool. And since then, I worked there about 3.5 years, worked my way up to global recruiting director. So I handled all recruiting across the globe for the Motley Fool and its international offices and domestic office. And then decided that I was going to go out on my own. And they were actually my first client and why I started the business that I have today.
So tell us a little bit about that business, how you can go from working kind of in-house at the Motley Fool to kind of putting your own shingle out in your own company and then becoming a client. Did they outsource the work that you were doing to you and your new company?
No, so it's they didn't outsource it completely. So what happened was I went to the CEO and chief people officer. And remember, this was like pre-COVID, right before everyone could work remotely in any state, as we've seen a lot of people move towards in the last 3-4 years. But I said, do you all want to open a North Carolina office? Because I think I want to move back. And my husband and I at the time had decided we wanted to start a family, and we did not want to do that outside of DC. And so we thought, okay, let's look at going back to North Carolina. And the CEO and chief people officer said, well, we don't really want to open the entire state just yet. But what if you started your own business and we were your first client? And so I shifted from being an in-house employee with the Motley Fool one day, and literally the next day, it was like a Tuesday, Wednesday switch. I was owner of this business and they were my first client. And I did a lot of the talent work in those first several months with them as my first client. I did a lot of the recruiting and the talent work that I had done as part of that job as global recruiting director, but was able to kind of push off into my own sphere. And they gave me a very nice, lifting ground to be able to do that.
So you're an industry leader in all things people and talent. Your content on LinkedIn is compelling. Talk a little bit about your social media strategy and share how you became or won the award Most Inclusive HR Influencer.
Oh, yeah, that was an award I got a couple years ago, and it's a list that's ongoing. So once you're on it, you're kind of still on it for a few years. I have always had this, ever since I can remember, this kind of burning need to help others that may not have the same voice or privilege that I do. And that's really what has driven me and helped my work in HR is that DEIJ, that diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice piece of what HR does. And that's also what drove me to write the book. And it is something that for me, it just is part of who I am. It's something that I will always push forward. And that's really, part of a compelling piece for just what is in my bones. For me, you said social media. It's funny that you asked me about social media as well, because when I started posting content on LinkedIn more than 10 years ago, no one in HR talked about their experience. No one in HR talked about their company. No one said anything bad about anything. It was like, we're the mystery keepers. We can't say anything. And then one day I just got so fed up and needed just an outlet, and needed an outlet for telling everyone what was happening inside some of the businesses I was working in. And I just started posting. I posted what I thought, what was happening to me, what was happening in real life. It was very authentic because it was very real. It literally was an outlet for what I was seeing every day. And since then, I've kept up that authenticity because people ask me all the time, do you have a schedule? Do you have an editorial schedule that you post on LinkedIn? No, it is literally what comes into my brain and I post it, or what's happening to me in the moment and I post it. And I have had people come up to me over the years that have said, I followed you for 8 years. I followed you for 10 years. I followed you for 6 years. And actually, I've had some people that have even come up to me to say, I followed you since you started the culture blog at the Motley Fool, which is more than 11 years ago. And so it's interesting to know that you've had people that you drew in and that were drawn to you for that space. And most of the time, the people that come up to me and say, thank you for saying this thing, thank you for being authentic, are those people who do not look like me. And they say, thank you for giving a voice to this. Thank you for speaking out. Thank you for saying this thing that everyone else keeps quiet and needs to be said. And so really my social media strategy goes back to the DEIJ piece. It really is just being authentic, putting the stuff out there, speaking up when you need to speak up so that change can happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll say I'm modestly active on social media, and people will from time to time ask what my kind of personal social media strategy is. And it's really stream of consciousness.
Right?
It's not like this.
It's not planned. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not planned. If it's on my mind, I might share it. So
right.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I have to filter myself from time to time. And I was looking at your background, and before we kind of jump into some other things that I want to talk about, one of the titles that you had really jumped out at me, and that was Idea Practitioner at NASA.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your work with NASA, and what does an idea practitioner do?
So yeah, that's great. It's interesting that you read that as idea. You're not the first person who's done that. What it actually stands for is IDEA, which is inclusivity, diversity, equity, and accessibility. So it goes back to the DEIJ piece. It's just different acronyms for similar language. And what NASA did, I guess about a year ago, maybe it's been a little bit longer since, is they gathered a bunch of thought leaders in the space. And they said, when we have things that are happening at NASA, when we have new initiatives, projects, communications, and things like that, we really want to make sure we are being thoughtful about how we are thinking about every group of people. And so they got a bunch of thought leaders together to pull us into these instances when they do have things that they need to run across us, right? Like it's communication, it can be a project, it can be what are we not thinking about? And I really, really enjoy that NASA does that. It's a more of a rarity in government entities than you would think it would be. And I wish it was way more prevalent, but it's nice just being kind of a part of that group to be looked at to say you're, one of your science leaders in your country, in the world, is looking to you to say, what are we missing? Which is such I think, an amazing just testament to what NASA does and how thoughtful they are.
So we've talked about kind of your journey. We've talked about some of the experiences you've had, but let's kind of like dive into kind of the philosophical and like what's at the core of what drives you. And the research that we've done, the phrase people first mindset continues to pop up. So can you talk a little bit about what an organizational people first mindset looks like and why it's important?
Yeah. So I think this has become one of those things, as you mentioned, that gets thrown out around a lot, but it's not actually acted upon enough. And being people first means that when you're taking care of your people will take care of your customers and the revenue will show it. And being people first means actively making sure that you're providing better workplaces for the people that are working with you to achieve the mission that you're all there to help work towards. And people first, in my definition of it, means that you are considering not what's always been done, right? Because that's not always people first. And you're considering not what's easy. You're considering not what everyone else is doing or what your friend who's a fellow CEO is doing. It really is focusing on what do we need to do to provide a better day-to-day workplace for our people? And how do we do that? And one of the big key pieces of being a people first organization is by having your DEIJ, your diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice thoughts, initiatives, and questions in every layer of your organization and in every business decision. If you are not layering that DEI perspective on every business decision you're making across the board, you're not people first. So that's kind of like the first thing on my checklist is, are you really, is DEIJ integrated into your business? Or is it one team, one crew, one chief diversity officer that is tasked with all the things? Then that's not people first. Right. DEIJ also needs to be an active, responsibility of everyone in the organization as much as it is integrated into the business. So again, people first really just is what it means what it says. It's just something that is a little harder to do because you have to be really thoughtful about it.
Yeah, it reminds me of the mantra that the Marines use where they say, mission first, people always.
Yeah.
If an organization doesn't have this mindset, right, and they come to the kind of revelation that that's what's holding them back as an organization, how do they move in that direction? What are some of like the necessary steps? You talked about layering DEIJ into every decision, but what does that journey look like?
Right. Well, first I would say have them call us because that's what we focus on. But secondarily, I would say, the first place to start is to be authentic with where you are. There is no employee out there that thinks that their workplace is perfect. There just isn't, because there is no perfect workplace. And being real with where you are and then being transparent with where you are will gain you so many more loyal employees than trying to act like you have it all figured out. Because when you act like you have it all figured out, people see right through it. And so that's the first step that we take with a lot of organizations, a lot of our clients, is saying, where are you really? Let's get real with where you are today Because when you don't know where your starting line is, you have no idea how far you've come. You have no idea where you're trying to go to. You really need to know where your starting line is. And so we start with figuring out, doing listening tours and figuring out where is it. And by the way, a lot of people think, well, I can do that with an employee engagement survey. Not really, because if you have a workforce that may not feel safe enough to tell you what they really feel, they're not going to tell you on an employee engagement survey. So you're not really going to know. You first have to show them that you trust them. You have to show them that you're going to be real and authentic with where you are as an organization. And then that trust factor will grow. And then together as an organization with the leaders and the employees, you will grow together and you'll learn and be thoughtful together and you'll work towards that people first environment. But it does really take getting very realistic with where you are right now so that you can work from it.
So you have a book coming out at the end of February called The Revolution of Work. Tell us how the idea for the book came about.
Yes. So, yes, Revolution of Work. It's really about pushing the status quo. I often say the status quo has got to go. We, in this country, for better or for worse, and a lot of it has been for worse, the way that we work really goes back to how the founding fathers set up our country to work, right? And it hasn't really changed a lot. Like if you think about work in the last 50 years, not much has changed. And the reason that I wanted to talk about the revolution of work and write this book, two main reasons, I should say. One is we've heard the future of work, especially if you're in HR, people, or talent. You've heard the future of work for years, about a decade, and not enough has changed. We also are seeing all-time highs of employee disengagement. We are seeing all-time highs of employee stress, and we are seeing all-time highs of employees having mental health issues because work isn't working. It just isn't. If it worked, we wouldn't be seeing this. And so we have to really decide to stop plugging the holes and do something more about it. So the revolution of work is talking about my own experiences over 120 organizations around the world, the trends that I have seen, what doesn't work in work, what works, what makes it easier for people to actually enjoy working, ways we can start to dismantle the rigid system of what we are told work is supposed to be, and how we can strip that away to really start to rebuild something that actually works for people. And works for all people, right? Works for all humans, works for people no matter their what their background is, what their race is, what their level of income is. It works for a lot of people. So that's really why I wanted to write The Revolution of Work, is because I have been hearing the same thing over the same thing for so long, and nothing is getting better. It's getting worse. So we have to do a shakeup of the entire system and just say, this isn't working. Let's rethink this.
So it sounds like it's a call for a revolution more so than it is kind of the revolution that we've experienced. It's
correct.
Something to come, right?
Right. And it's starting, right? We're seeing that a little bit with Gen Z. We're going to definitely see that with Gen Alpha. Gen Z is already saying, sorry, but no, we're not going to do these things, right? We're going to opt out. And we're going to see more and more of that. So it's already starting. The revolution's already starting a little bit. It's just we really need to grasp it and carry it forward.
How much of the fire on this was lit or at least sparked by COVID and work from home and, some of the things that we were able to learn through that time?
I think a lot of it. I think that we all realized as humans exactly what was important to us during COVID. And I think for a lot of us, it wasn't work, right? And so I think that I had to tell someone this the other day, actually. We're never going back as a society, as the world, to how we operated pre-COVID. It's just never going to be the same. It's like trying to take that one moment in time where you had an amazing time with friends, an amazing time at a party, amazing time at a restaurant, and trying to recreate that exact thing. It never works. It's the same with work before COVID and how we all operated in life before COVID. We're never going to get back there. We just aren't. We're changed. And so now we have to change the way that we work moving forward. I think that silver lining of COVID was that it actually rushed a lot of us to realize what was important. And, part of what's in this book is talking about things like return to office and talking about why that exists and why people want it, to go back. So it really dives into a lot of what we all found, extremely important during COVID, and why we need to keep some of those things that we really learned about during COVID and carry that forward.
So a lot about what you're talking about is around things that we struggle in the DE&IJ space, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of dismantling generational systems that have been in place, right? You think about I have a friend that works at Google. I was recently there in New York City, and I'm like, what a fantastic workplace, right? There's food wherever you want the food. You can go get a workout. And the more I thought about it, the more it became apparent. Well, yeah, they do all that because they want you to stay at work,
right?
They want to keep you there. So whether you're a large kind of innovative tech company or world-class university, how do you go about dismantling some of those systems that have been in place for forever in a way that continues, the success of the organization?
Right. So I have a very good friend. I'll call her out on this. Her name is Jenny Newforth. She just got married. Jenny Cody Kangas is her name previous to getting married. And she likes to say a phrase that I love as well. And I'm going to use it here, crediting her. And it's, you just choose to begin, right? Like we're not going to change this overnight. You just choose to begin. The other way to think about it is, I think the common line is eat the frog first, right? So just take something hard that's not working in your workplace and see if you stripped all kinds of manners of societal obligation and restrictions away, what you would build. And I think if we take that mindset, and that's the mindset of this book, is there's no box for you to work in. Take the box away. Now what would you do? And that is how we need to think about work moving forward. So it's really just choosing to begin, and you stack small thing on top of small thing and you make change. And if it's thoughtful, it can be sustainable, which will then create systemic change. So that's sort of the idea of the movement is me by myself, I can do so much. One person by themselves can do so much. But in a group of 10, what can we achieve? In a group of 100, what can we achieve? In a group of 100,000 HR leaders, what can we achieve with work? In a group of 1 million HR leaders or people, employees in general, what can you do? And I think what we're seeing is, especially with, for instance, the SAG-AFTRA union and a lot of these unionization efforts, we're seeing that these things are working. The callback, the pushback against the status quo of like, this isn't going to fly anymore is working. And so we need more of that. We need more impact. We need more people to talk about it and do the things and try the things and just begin. So yeah, back to that of just starting and just going down the path, just choosing one foot in front of the other.
This is the People of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by Anessa Fike. She's the CEO and founder of Fike & Co. and the author of The Revolution of Work. So before, we like to have a little bit of fun at the end of every podcast where we do the lightning round. Before we get into that, how can people find out more information about the work you're doing if they're not watching us on YouTube and seeing all the links scroll across the bottom there? How can people learn more about your work?
Amazing. So they can go to fikeandco.com. It's FIKEANDCO.com. They can also find me on LinkedIn, Anessa Fike, and then also just on Instagram at Fike & Co. So I always say I'm a bad millennial. I don't do most other social media other than LinkedIn and Instagram. I barely do Instagram. So you can find me there.
Excellent. All right, let's have a little bit of fun. What was your favorite class at Penn State?
Oh gosh, I knew you were going to ask me this, and it's funny to think back around what my favorite class was. I really enjoyed, I took a couple of classes in women's studies that I really enjoyed. But I think if I really am like real with myself, I really loved the editing classes because I was really good at them. So there's an entire class of journalism where you just do Chicago Manual style editing. And I remember I used to go into those test days and I love editing. I'm like a grammar geek. I love that. And so I would just run through the tests and be done before anyone else. I really loved editing, which is such like a nerd thing to say, but but there it is. Yeah.
If you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's good. I think I would probably pick someone that would energize me. And I think we could get a lot of stuff done together. So I would probably pick someone like AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or Michelle Obama or something like that. I would want to I'm always trying to kind of multitask my time and be most efficient. So if I could have dinner with someone while we were trying to figure out how to make work better across the country, then I would probably try to do that. So those would be my top two choices.
And just out of curiosity, where in Raleigh would you take them to eat?
Oh, God, that's a good one. Probably I'm going to do a call out of Coletta. Coletta is an amazing Italian restaurant. It's actually in Cary. And they have a wonderful, wonderful chef there. So I'd probably take them there. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. What is your most unusual "we are" moment been? Either where you saw a Penn Stater and you yelled out "we are," or someone recognized you as a Penn Stater and you got the "we are"?
I think the most random one is probably at like gas stations.
Right.
Where you just like, you don't even know what's happening. And then someone just says it and you're like, oh wait, that was for me. You're looking around. That happens actually pretty frequently to me. I would say like over the last 10 years, it's probably happened like 3 or 4 times. So at a gas station.
How about your favorite Penn State sport?
Oh, football.
Yeah. And your favorite flavor of creamery ice cream?
Death by chocolate.
Death by chocolate. That's a popular choice here on the People of Penn State. Anessa, we want to thank you for joining us on the podcast and for allowing us to share your story with Penn Staters. When people like you allow us to do this, it raises the value of all Penn State degrees, and we're truly grateful for that.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been amazing.
I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. If you like this episode, I hope that you'll go and subscribe to the People of Penn State podcast in your favorite podcast app of choice. And while you're there, go ahead and give us a rating and drop us a review. It'll help us spread the word of all these great stories to fellow Penn Staters. If you're a member of the Alumni Association, thank you for your support. And if you're not yet a member, what are you waiting for? Go to our website at alumni.psu.edu, and you too can become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thank you for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are